Hey, it's Luke from LT Gaming, and today, very excitingly, we're taking a look at a new game called Divided Empire Sengoku. It's a strategy game set in feudal Japan that has come across my radar, and it's got me asking one question straight away. Is it trying to be the next Shogun? And we're going to dive into all the information we have and try to find out. On the surface here, yes, you've got the Sengoku setting, rival clans, the push to unite Japan, and real-time battles. But the more I dug into this one, the more it felt like a broader and denser take on the strategy side, rather than just remaking somebody else's formula. Now, before we continue, make sure to hit like on the video, consider it your small but meaningful contribution to the clan treasury, before we begin our march for the title of Shogun. At its core, Divided Empire Sengoku is a strategy game set in the chaos of Sengoku era Japan. I know some of you are going to love that, where you can lead a clan through war, diplomacy, expansion, and political maneuvering in a bid to come out on top. The Steam page frames it around strategic leadership, diplomacy, territory development, and real-time battles. While the developer, after I reached out to him, sent me a PDF, tries to make it clearer by saying it's not just about battlefield tactics. This is meant to be a real-world, map-heavy strategy game with RTS combat layered on top. And just like Carthage Bellum Punicum, this is important to understand. This is not going to be sold as a pure battle sim. It's being sold as a Sengoku grand strategy game where you're managing resources, navigating alliances, dealing with a large number of provinces and factions, and then taking those tensions into battle when diplomacy is not working. I think it's going to feel like a bit of a crossroads between Shogun, Total War, Nobunaga's Ambition, and even some lighter grand strategy ideas. Now, one caveat here, this is very early and I am speculating a little bit on the information I've been given. But the reason I think this is worth watching is simple. There are loads of strategy fans who love feudal Japan, me being one of them. But there are really not that many modern games trying to tackle the Sengoku era with this kind of scope. We've had great games in and around the setting, of course, but when you see something new and exciting like this, it grabs your attention very quickly, or it did to me. And this developer is not coming out of nowhere. It's the same guy behind Polismos, I'm not even sure if I said that right, which launched in December 2024 and currently sits on a mostly positive Steam rating. That does not guarantee this game will be a hit, of course, but it does at least tell you there is already a released strategy title under the developer's belt. And I think this stuff matters when you're looking at projects from a solo creator. And then from the LT Gaming point of view, I just like the lane this game is trying to occupy. We cover a lot of games that sit slightly outside the big mainstream strategy giants, games that maybe do not have the budget or spectacle of the heavyweights, but they have a clear idea of what they want to be. Divided Empire Sengoku feels like one of those. Now, trying to talk about what's new or developing is a bit of a trickier section because unlike some of the games we cover, there is not a giant pile of devlogs to pull apart yet. But there are still a few useful things I can say after speaking with the developer. He told me that the project is halfway through development with a Q4 2026 target. So we've still a little way to go, but it is on the horizon. Then the scope that was described to me is actually pretty ambitious. The developer says the game is aiming for 200 plus provinces or locations, around 90 playable factions and a more granular 365-day tick year, rather than a simple seasonal turn structure you saw in Shogun Total War. On top of that, the resource model is meant to include things like gold, wood, stone, food, manpower, admin ability, authority, and trade capacity, which to me suggests a pretty strategic layer to the economy. And of course, then we have those real-time battles. Now, they look a little bit smaller in scale at the moment, but maybe that's more realistic for the period and the setting. But I do like what I see so far, even with early alpha footage, and I think this is going to develop as the year progresses. Just a quick interlude to say most of you who watch the channel are not subscribed. So make sure to go down below and hit that subscribe button because it helps smaller channels like us grow really quickly, and both me and Tom really appreciate it. Now, of course, with these titles and LT Gaming, we need to stay grounded. Ambition is great, but ambition is also where these sorts of games can get into trouble. When you hear 200 plus provinces, around 90 factions, a layered resource system, diplomacy and real-time battles, all from a solo developer, the obvious question becomes whether all those systems will feel properly deep and polished or whether some end up being a little thin. I also think comparisons to Total War are a bit dangerous for the game if people take them too literally. That comparison is useful for getting the setting and the general structure across quickly, but if viewers go in expecting the same production values, battle animations and cinematic punch of a creative assembly title, they are probably setting themselves up wrong. I know us YouTubers don't help with some of our snappy titles sometimes, but it's what we have to do to get seen. But I think the smarter way to look at this is more indie, systems-driven strategy game that happens to share some familiar DNA. So let's talk about the big comparisons properly. Of course, the natural reference point here is Shogun Total War. Same broad historical backdrop, same race for dominance in feudal Japan, and same blend of strategy and warfare. But what stands out from the developer's notes is that Divided Empire Sengoku is trying to be more focused on the campaign and world map side of things than Shogun traditionally was. It also looks like this game will have more starting provinces and locations and more playable factions. That's very impressive for an indie title and gives you lots of flavour to play with during the grand campaign. I also played a huge amount of Nobunaga's Ambition, and that does bring in some very Eastern influences into the gameplay loops, so it will be good to see how this game tackles that complexity. So the question here is not, is this better than Shogun? Because that is way too early and probably the wrong framing anyway. The better question is whether this can become a genuinely worthwhile indie Sengoku strategy game for people who want more map level control and more campaign complexity. That to me is where the real promise sits with this one. Next up, I'd love to see some proof of how the campaign actually looks. I want to see diplomacy implementation, seasonal changes, and how each faction has its own identity. I'd also love a clearer look at what makes army composition, terrain, and weather actually matter beyond just being bullet points on the store page. So overall, LT gamers, Divided Empire Sengoku is definitely one to keep an eye on, especially for those huge fans of this time period. It's got that great setting, a strong comparison hook, and more importantly, it seems to be aiming for its own lane by pushing harder into grand strategy scale and campaign detail, much like Carthage Bellum Punicum. Let me know what you think in the comments, guys. Does this look like a promising new Sengoku strategy game to you? Do all that YouTube stuff that helps us grow, guys. We really appreciate it. Like, comment, subscribe, everything. And I do genuinely love reading everything that you say. I've been Luke from LT Gaming, and as always, I'll catch you on the next one.